My family recently found out that I am wealthy, and now they expect me to pay for a $35,000 vacation after I've already paid off all of their mortgages. To start, I'm a 45-year-old woman married with 3 kids. About 12 years ago, my financial situation changed dramatically when I received a substantial inheritance. I worked hard in my profession, which pays well, and I made some smart investments that have paid off over time. Over the years, my wealth has steadily grown, and my husband views it as my money since we don't have a prenup. When the inheritance first came through, my husband and I agreed that we would take care of our family. We paid off the mortgage on our house, bought a new car, and purchased a vacation property in our favorite location, which we rent out most of the year. We set up college funds for our 3 children, each one receiving an equal amount that should cover their college costs for the next 5 years. If there's any money left over, they can use it as a down payment on their first home. As my investments continued to grow, I started considering what I could do for my extended family. My husband has 2 sisters, and we have 5 nieces and nephews on his side. I also have a brother with 2 children. I decided to set up college funds for all of the nieces, nephews, and cousins, matching the amount I set aside for my own kids. Under the same conditions, I paid the cost of college for my eldest niece, who was already enrolled, making sure she graduated on time with money left over. To keep things fair, I paid the amount already owed to her parents. Afterward, I had an accountant calculate the best way to help my brother and one of my sister-in-laws with their mortgages. I paid off a significant portion of both. For my parents, whose house was already paid off, I sent them on a lovely vacation. I also contributed to my in-laws' rent, enabling them to save some money. Additionally, part of my wealth goes to charity, both locally and internationally. One year, my husband, our kids, and I went on a paid vacation with both my family and his. At this point, everyone seemed grateful for the help. However, one of my sister-in-laws has always had a tendency to be the center of attention. While she's nice to my face, I know for a fact that she has been bad-mouthing me behind my back, making passive-aggressive remarks about my work and personal life. Yet, she does so in a way that makes it hard for anyone to call her out, so I often end up looking like the villain. If you ever need a way to handle someone like her, my go-to move, and it never fails, is to act clueless and overly literal with her words. I nitpick every sentence she throws at me, and somehow I've managed to shut her down multiple times without ever being labeled the bad guy. Over the past few years, my sister-in-law has been dropping not-so-subtle hints that I should foot the bill for an extravagant family vacation for her entire crew abroad, no less. Keep in mind, she and her husband have a sizable savings account, money that was originally intended for their kids' college tuition, which has mostly just sat untouched. During the height of the pandemic, the topic went cold. They've been extremely cautious, still are to this day. But now that things are opening back up, we get invited to a joint birthday bash for her and one of her sons. No big deal, we show up with thoughtful gifts. Her son got a voucher to get himself a tent or some outdoor gear, which he's been saving up for. She got a flexible gift card she could use however she wanted. I even tossed in some vacation goodies: sunscreen, beach snacks, drinks, thinking she might finally book that trip she'd been talking about. At the party, she casually asks about our own vacation plans. We say we're staying local this year, nothing fancy, just a week in a rented cabin, still cooking our own meals, probably doing some hiking and board games with the kids. She gives the usual "oh, how lovely" routine and starts saying they haven't decided on anything yet, but both my husband and I already know what's coming. Trying to change the subject, we suggest a few low-key ideas. Maybe they could stay with extended family for a weekend, or try a family-friendly campground we visited once that has kids' activities. But then she pulls out her phone and shows us this resort she found online. And honestly, it looked awesome. Not over the top luxurious, but all-inclusive, full of water slides, kid-friendly amenities, spa access, the works. Price tag? Just under $35,000 for her family of 7. My husband, always quick with a polite response, says something like, "Wow, that's a lot. But hey, you've saved up, good for you." And that's when she drops the bomb. "Oh no, we didn't save. We assumed you'd cover it. You know, as my birthday gift." Excuse me, she wasn't asking. She expected me to hand over 35 grand for her birthday, just because I had the means. She goes on with this long speech about how I earn plenty, how we're family, how I've already promised things for our godson and the other nieces and nephews. Blah blah blah. We all sat there in complete silence. Even the birthday boy and his sister stopped what they were doing and looked at us. My husband just burst out laughing. He genuinely thought it was a joke. My father-in-law just sat there, silent, watching it all unfold. And me? I must have looked like I was auditioning to be a stunned goldfish. No, my sister-in-law wasn't joking. She was completely serious. You have the money, you could just give it. You wouldn't even notice it's gone. This is the same woman who's never missed an opportunity to downplay my work or throw subtle jabs in that sugary, passive-aggressive way that makes it hard to confront her without looking like the villain. My husband, her own father, and I have all called her out in the past, but she always plays the innocent card. There she sat, eyes widened, that fake sweet smile plastered on, as she laid out a list of reasons why we should gift her family this vacation, as if we hadn't already given her a generous birthday voucher. I finally pulled myself together and gave her the one sentence she clearly didn't want to hear. "Yes, I do have the money." She lit up. "So you can pay for it." "I could," I replied calmly, before she tried to cut me off. "Oh, that's wonderful, but I won't." Cue the sputtering. But, we deserve it. You wouldn't even miss the money. We're family." "True," I said. "You and I are family, not by choice, but fact. And yes, I love being family to your kids, they're amazing." I continued, still composed. "Fact, we all want a break after the madness of the last few years." False. I wouldn't miss the money, because I absolutely would, since it wouldn't be where I left it. That was a joke, by the way, I added dryly, but neither of them laughed. My sister-in-law and her husband doubled down, still pushing the idea that I owe them this vacation, that I should just say yes because I can afford it. So I said what needed to be said. "Listen, you've made it clear time and time again you don't respect me or what I do. You dismiss how hard I've worked and the sacrifices I've made. And despite that, I've paid off your mortgage, covered your kids' college tuition, and even helped them with funds for their future homes." Her face started twitching. "You've gossiped about me, insulted me behind my back, and even told people my husband should leave me." She opened her mouth to deny it, but it was too late. My father-in-law backed me up. And then came the real twist. Her own children chimed in. They'd heard her say awful things about me. The birthday boy's sweet kid had even caught part of one of her rants on video while filming a TikTok. He showed it to us. My brother-in-law, who had just called me a liar, went absolutely silent. Then came her last-ditch effort. "Well, fine. If you're not going to pay for the vacation, the least you could do is cover the plane tickets and let us use your vacation house. You know how much we love that place." Yes, the same house I bought with my own money after years of discipline and strategy. Nice try. 12 years ago, when I was 45, things came to a boiling point with my sister-in-law, though honestly, the tension had been building for years. We'd recently booked a quiet vacation in the countryside, just a cozy cabin stay. Nothing extravagant. It was our way of reconnecting as a family after a stressful period. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law had been dropping heavy hints about wanting an all-inclusive getaway for her entire family of 7, the kind that costs tens of thousands. And she wasn't subtle about who she thought should foot the bill. Me. Here's the kicker. I'd already gifted her a generous birthday voucher, complete with extras for a future trip, sunscreen, some fun drinks, the works. But apparently, that wasn't enough. She tried to push further. She asked well, demanded that we not only cover the trip but also let them stay in our vacation home, the same one we rent to a local family most of the year, especially during the pandemic years when they couldn't or wouldn't travel. I told her flat out, that's not happening. 1. The family currently living there can't just leave. 2. You don't get to make demands. That birthday voucher has more than enough for a decent trip. 3. You already had a fully paid for holiday courtesy of us. And 4. If you want more money, then go earn more. You have a degree, use it. Then came the classic turn. Waterworks. She turned to her father, maybe hoping for backup, but he sided with me completely. He told her straight he'd seen how hard my husband and I had worked for everything we had. He respected that. And my husband? He was livid. He told his sister, with zero sugarcoating, that this entitled behavior ends now. We gathered our kids, packed up, and left. Later, my mother-in-law called. She has a soft spot for that sister-in-law. It's no secret she's the favorite. She gave the whole speech about how hard things were for them before we helped out, how much they'd struggled, but my husband handled it with grace and firmness. After a long talk, she understood. And then, well, this is where it gets a little poetic. Turns out, her kids were furious about what she'd tried to pull. They felt ashamed and came to talk to us. We've always had a good relationship with them, and they seemed genuinely scared that this would change things. We sat down with them and explained everything, why we don't just hand out money, even to family, especially after having already given generous gifts and support. The youngest was a bit defensive, still siding with their parents, but the others understood. They knew about the college and housing funds we'd quietly set up for them. We made it clear that we didn't hold them accountable for their parents' actions. They stayed for dinner. It felt like a healing moment. Since then, things have been complicated. The kids still live at home, but the relationship is clearly strained. They keep things polite, chores, updates, but that's about it. The closeness is gone. Of course, the flying monkeys arrived. Distant relatives and family allies messaged us, called us, even lectured us after hearing only her side of the story. But that came to a stop pretty quickly. One of her kids, the birthday boy, posted a short video clip online. Just a snippet from a conversation he accidentally recorded while filming a TikTok, where his mom's true colors came through loud and clear. Suddenly, those flying monkeys backed off. Some even apologized. A few admitted they'd felt torn, not knowing the full story. The only thing that still sits heavy is knowing that my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, are caught in the middle of it all. She's deeply family-oriented, and I know this hurts her more than she lets on. But at some point, you have to stop paying for people who don't respect you and start protecting the peace you worked so hard to build. I know some people might be wondering why I didn't just give them the money. Honestly, one major reason is how my sister-in-law has treated me. Long before any of this money came into the picture, there's always been this quiet hostility, this passive-aggressive sweetness that masks the disdain. And I've always felt uneasy about just handing out money, especially when it's not appreciated, just expected. So, here's part 2 of the story. After I said no to funding their dream vacation, my sister-in-law was livid, disappointed that I didn't cave to her expectations. She wasted no time rallying others to her side. A few flying monkeys, as my husband and I now call them, came sniffing around, parroting her talking points, but most of them backed off after hearing our side of things. Unfortunately, the damage was already done. Thanks to her, the entire extended family on my husband's side now knew exactly how much money we had, and that was never supposed to be public knowledge. Apparently, in her frustration, she'd called around to half the family, painting me as the villain who hoards wealth and plays favorites. Soon, whispers were circulating about how I'd helped fund college for some cousins' kids, and that we'd covered the costs of a previous extended family trip a few years back. Somehow, generosity had turned into ammunition. Just a few days after the fallout, I got a call from an aunt and uncle, people who, up to that point, had never initiated contact. I was folding laundry, so I put the phone on speaker. It started off light enough. They asked how we were doing, how we managed through the whole COVID mess, swapping stories about quarantines and missed birthdays. Then the tone shifted. So, the aunt began. We've heard you've set up college funds for some of the cousins' children. Is that true? I paused but answered honestly. Yes, that's true. I've helped where I could. And is it also true that you paid for your in-laws and both of your sister-in-laws and their families to go on holiday before? Yes. And you own a vacation home? Yes, we do. They hesitated. Then came the punch. Well, we think it's only fair that you do the same for our grandchildren. They're part of the family too. I blinked in silence. We'd like you to set up college funds for our 6 grandchildren. Let's say $800,000 each should be sufficient. Also, we'd like a vacation home. Not where yours is, but we've picked a spot. We'll send you the location details. And we'd like you to take our entire family on a holiday. You've got the money. You should be doing this for all of us. I was stunned. I actually laughed not out of amusement, but because I didn't know what else to do. This was the entitlement I was up against. Not requests, not gratitude, just expectations. Assumptions that because we'd worked hard, made smart choices, and yes, had some luck, that we now owed everyone else a slice of what we built. No one asked how we got here. No one cared about the sacrifices. They just wanted in. The hardest part? Navigating this while still trying to maintain some peace in the family, for the sake of the kids, for my husband, for my in-laws who are caught in the middle. But I've learned this. Generosity is a gift, not an obligation, and it has to be received with respect. Otherwise, it turns into resentment. And I've had enough of that to last a lifetime. I sat there in stunned silence. They kept going, ranting about how they deserved the money because we're family, and family looks after its own. My husband, who had walked in halfway through the call, overheard everything. He was seething. Quiet fury, the kind that simmers deep. Meanwhile, I calmly hit the record button on my phone. I asked them to repeat their demands just so there'd be no confusion later. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, I asked if there was anything else they wanted to add. There wasn't. So I laid it out, plain and simple. This isn't going to happen. You might believe you're entitled to our money, but you're not. Then, I reminded them of something they'd once said to us, back when my husband and I were still struggling. This was 12 years ago, before everything changed. We'd hit a rough patch financially after a health crisis, and we had nowhere else to turn. We reached out to family, every one of them. Out of 9 aunts and uncles, only 3 lent us a hand, and we paid every cent back. But what stuck with me wasn't who helped. It was what some of them said when they refused. If you can't afford to take care of your own family, maybe you shouldn't have one. So I quoted that line right back to them. I told them I wouldn't be giving them a cent, that their demands were out of line, and that if they truly believed in that old mantra about responsibility and self-reliance, then maybe they should apply it to themselves. Silence on the other end. I wrapped it up. Feel free to let everyone else know not to call us with this kind of nonsense. We're not the family ATM. And I hung up. My husband was proud of me, furious at them, but proud that I held my ground. In the weeks that followed, a few more calls trickled in, some from relatives who had clearly heard the rumor mill spinning. Some were subtle in their requests, others weren't, but the only people who reached out with genuine support were the same aunts and uncles who had helped us back when we needed it most. They told us plainly, "It's your money. You've been generous enough. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for setting boundaries." One cousin someone we're close to called with a respectful request. They were just short on a house down payment. They'd saved the bulk of it but were about $1,000 short. It was a tight window and they needed the funds quickly to secure the property. I agreed under one condition: a certified loan agreement. They accepted without hesitation. The moment word got out that I'd helped one cousin, all hell broke loose again. The The same aunts, uncles, and cousins who had turned a blind eye to us in our hardest years were now up in arms, furious that I'd helped some, but not all. But here's the thing. I no longer lose sleep over who's offended, because real family doesn't just show up with open hands. They show up with open hearts. We had a Zoom call a few days after the previous drama. I laid everything out as calmly and clearly as I could. I explained that I'm not against helping family, but it has to be done the right way. If someone's in genuine need, they can come to me, and we'll set it up under a proper legal agreement. That way, both sides are protected, and no one feels taken advantage of. My cousin, the one I loaned some money to, actually shared a screenshot of the notarized agreement during the call. Some of the relatives seemed to understand. Not thrilled, but they got it. Others, not so much. And then came the cherry on top. Last week, I pulled into our street after work and immediately knew something was off. A line of unfamiliar cars stretched down both sides of our usually quiet block. I had to drive past my own house just to find a parking spot. That's when I realized what was happening. About 15 or 20 relatives, mostly aunts, uncles, cousins, and their spouses had gathered on our front lawn like they were staging some kind of intervention. So much for social distancing. At this point, there were 3 aunts, 3 uncles, and several cousins still lingering around the front yard, looking agitated. I parked a few houses down and walked back calmly. And here's the thing. While most people know I'm generous, those who really know me understand one other detail: I don't take well to being pushed around. So, as I walked, I called the non-emergency number for our local police. I explained that there was a large, uninvited gathering on my property, that things seemed tense, and that it might escalate. They said they'd dispatch a unit just in case. And wouldn't you know it, just as I stepped onto my property, all hell broke loose. Shouting, accusations, demands. A few of them started yelling about how I owed them, how if I didn't pay up willingly, they'd make sure I did. Several of them crowded me, getting far too close, waving fingers in my face and jabbing at my arms and shoulders. I told them repeatedly to stop and leave. I remained firm but composed, even as the shouting intensified. Luckily, some of our neighbors had also called the police when they saw the crowd forming, and within minutes, patrol cars pulled up. Everything changed when the officers arrived. They were closing in on me when one uncle made a serious mistake. He slapped me. A grown man, well over 6'3", struck me, a woman barely 5'2", right across the face. This happened in full view of the police officers who had just arrived. The entire crowd went silent. He then leaned in, practically nose to nose with me, and started shouting something about respecting elders and how I needed to know my place in the family. His hand was still raised like he was going to hit me again, but he didn't get the chance. I stepped forward and dropped him with a single punch. He wasn't unconscious, just stunned, completely rattled that I'd stood my ground. Apparently, that was all the cops needed to see. The rest of the crowd froze, and the officers immediately began separating everyone and ordering them off the property. Some of the more cowardly ones, an aunt, an uncle, and a few cousins, bolted to their cars and drove away. The rest were held back and spoken to rather harshly by the officers. They ended up receiving citations for violating local gathering regulations, and there's talk that formal charges might still be filed, especially for the uncle who hit me. As for me, I'm okay. Just a few bruised knuckles. He, on the other hand, ended up with a fractured cheekbone. And thankfully, the security cameras I had installed caught everything. Now they're in the hands of the district attorney's office. Since then, most of the extended family has distanced themselves from the chaos. A few even reached out to quietly apologize and say they had no idea it would go that far. Still, I can't shake the guilt. I hate that this has become such a mess. I hate that boundaries are so often mistaken for selfishness. My husband keeps reminding me this is money I worked hard for. Years of long hours, discipline, sacrifices, and a bit of luck. It's not entitlement, it's earnings. I get to decide what happens with it. And truthfully, we've already done more than most would. Helped pay down mortgages, supported education, even sponsored a vacation that benefited multiple families. I've even considered setting up modest college funds for the remaining kids in the extended family, just to make sure no child gets caught in the crossfire of adult pettiness. But I hesitate, because I don't want to send the message that aggression, guilt trips, and mob-style pressure work. They don't, and they shouldn't. Honestly, I'm exhausted. Am I the jerk for saying no? For drawing a line and sticking to it? Because here's the thing. I tried to be fair. I tried to help where I could. And somehow, that made me a target. There's a strange pattern that seems to follow people who come into significant wealth, whether through inheritance, business, or just long-term success. Suddenly, your wins become someone else's entitlement. Your boundaries are viewed as betrayal. Your generosity is expected, not appreciated. And even after I thought of every possible way to help fairly paying off debts, funding education, offering structured support with legal protections, it still wasn't enough for some. I mean, when someone casually demands $35,000 for a luxury vacation that doesn't even include me, you start to question if logic and gratitude have left the building. So, what would you do? If you came into serious money, would you help your family? And how would you set limits without setting off emotional grenades? Let me know below. Am I the jerk here? Or just someone who finally said, enough?